In the winter fog of 1834, something was born in the shadowed hills of Kentucky that the world was never meant to remember. A pair of sisters who weren't supposed to know what they knew. Two girls identical in face, split in soul, who arrived in a forgotten Appalachian hamlet and dismantled a town with nothing but words. What they revealed was more than prophecy. It was invasion. A psychic trespass into the secret vaults of the human mind. And perhaps the vaults of something much older. If you're still here, know this. You're stepping into a place the average man was never meant to walk. This isn't entertainment. This isn't legend. What you're about to hear has been buried, erased, ignored by historians, not because it's false, but because it's true. Dangerously true. You see, our culture believes the past is dead. They build museums like mausoleums and speak of history like it belongs behind glass. But history isn't dead, it sleeps. And sometimes it speaks through the mouths of children. Sometimes the truth doesn't need evidence, it only needs memory. And memory, when it belongs to the wrong person, becomes a weapon. The Morrison twins didn't just recall secrets from people they'd never met. They reconstructed a crime that had been erased with hymns and hammers, a murder hidden beneath an altar, a deception so total that even God's house became a tomb. And if you think this is just one isolated ghost story wrapped in rural myth, you're not listening hard enough. Because these children are not anomalies. They are echoes. For those who've studied suppressed accounts of clairvoyance in frontier America, the Pine Hollow incident is one of dozens scrubbed from educational curricula, ignored by institutions, and categorized under folklore to ensure you never take it seriously. But if you look closely, it's always twins, always girls, always religious communities, always covered by scandal, and always followed by unexplained disappearances of records, journals, and in some cases people. The world you think you live in is curated, edited, controlled. Most men spend their lives in a sandbox of information, digging holes in pre-approved terrain. But every so often, someone finds the edge of that box. And if you're still watching, it means you're one of them. This isn't a story, this is an extraction. A dangerous retrieval of history buried under centuries of fear. Ask yourself, why did the US government fund psychics during the Cold War? Why do ancient cultures from Sumer to Tibet mention sacred twins as keys to prophecy and disaster? Why do secret societies, including the ones that still operate today, use mirrored symbolism? In every emblem, every ritual, every rite? It isn't art, it's architecture. It's code, and Pine Hollow is part of that code. Pastor Phillips wasn't just a bystander to the Morrison incident, he was a keeper of a far older secret. His predecessors had protected it. The Whitman family twin girls again were erased. Not because of what they did, but because of what they were. The same essence that stirred in Rachel and Rebecca Morrison. Something primordial, something the church feared but couldn't name. Some called it prophecy, others heresy. But those who truly understood it knew it as blood memory. The blood remembers, not just its own pain, but the pain of others. The acts committed in darkness. The lies carved into the wood of churches and the bones beneath them. These children didn't guess, they didn't intuit. They remembered. As if the veil between lifetimes had been momentarily lifted, and through it, a reckoning had slipped. If you're unsettled, good. You should be. You're not watching this to be entertained. You're watching because part of you is starving for something the modern world won't feed. Truth. Not the truth of politics, or religion, or history books written by safe men behind safe desks. I'm talking about the dangerous kind. The kind that fractures who you thought you were. The kind that makes you question your reflection. The kind that burns everything you were told to believe. And if you're still here, then it's time to go deeper. Because what happened in Pine Hollow wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random outburst of spiritual madness. It was a rupture, a crack in the mask of normalcy. And for 3 days in 1834, that mask fell entirely, not just for the community, for the country. The twins were a threat not because they spoke, but because they unlocked hidden traumas, generational guilt, suppressed memories inside others that were never supposed to surface. There's a reason modern psychology has no language for this. Why science avoids it. Why churches whisper about it, but never preach it. Because this knowledge destabilizes everything. And when systems, religious, educational, political, realize they can't control something, they erase it. This was not a supernatural phenomenon. This was a systemic one. And like all systems that get exposed, this one retaliated. They tried to erase the Morrison twins, but erasure isn't deletion. It's displacement. The story lives, scattered in journals, diaries, whispered family records, hidden in plain sight, like a virus in history's bloodstream, waiting for someone with the right mind to activate it. That person might be you. In the next section, we'll uncover why the US military became interested in ancestral retrieval research exactly 153 years after Pine Hollow, and why a recently declassified program eerily mirrors what the Morrison twins did organically. What if their gift wasn't a mutation, but a mechanism? And what if others, quiet, unknown, watching, are waiting for someone like you to remember what's been buried? Let me tell you a truth they'll never admit in textbooks, university lectures, or televised documentaries. The mind is not confined to the body. It never was. What the Morrison twins exhibited wasn't paranormal, it was pre-modern, ancient, a living echo of something our ancestors once wielded openly, before civilization began stamping it out, burning it from the record, and renaming it heresy. But here's the twist: they didn't burn it completely. They preserved it, quietly, selectively, in certain bloodlines, in isolated religious communities like Pine Hollow, in twin births, in children who remember things they shouldn't. Not to understand it, but to control it. Because nothing threatens power like an untamed mind that sees without being told what to see. And that's why what happened in 1834 didn't die in 1834. Now, listen closely, because this is where most men flinch, where the average viewer clicks away, returns to comfort, to certainty. But you're not average. You wouldn't still be here if you were. So I'm going to ask you to hold something in your mind as we move forward. What if the Morrison twins weren't anomalies, but prototypes? A 1987 Freedom of Information Act request unearthed a curious document buried in the archives of a now-defunct Military Psychological Research Division. Officially, it was called Project Mirrortone. The file was almost entirely redacted, but one page, mistakenly left intact, referenced early 19th century Appalachian manifestations, consistent with intrafamilial mnemonic resonance. The coordinates listed: Eastern Kentucky. The year? 1834. This wasn't coincidence. It was continuity. See, the intelligence community doesn't chase fairy tales. They follow patterns. And when multiple generations of twins, specifically female twins across rural Baptist sects, begin demonstrating uncanny cognitive phenomena, they don't call in the local priest. They call in the Defense Intelligence Agency. Because if one child can retrieve memories that aren't hers, what happens when a nation learns to do it? What happens when memory becomes a weapon? There's an idea few dare speak aloud, that the brain is not the storage device, but the receiver, a tuner, that what we think of as personal experience might actually be transmitted experience, accessed through a frequency we've forgotten how to hear. The Morrison twins? They heard it. And whatever they tuned into, it wasn't theirs alone. You know what's most terrifying to governments? Not dissidents, not revolutions. It's children who know things without being told. Because information is control. If you're not dependent on their books, their news, Their curated timelines, you're ungovernable. So they rewrite history not just to preserve lies, but to prevent awakening. And Pine Hollow was a breach. A signal flare in the dark. The Whitman family, killed and hidden beneath that church, were not just victims of local sin. They were part of a ritual one tied to the original settlement of the region. You see, when Pine Hollow was founded in 1818, it wasn't the only town established in that valley. There was another village a few miles east. It doesn't appear on modern maps. It was called Providence Hollow, founded by a fringe sect of Baptists who believed in the reincarnation of spiritual offices, not just souls, but roles. That prophets, martyrs, and apostles were not born anew, but returned in cycles, always in pairs, always in twins. The Whitman girls were the first return, and they were killed for it, but some survived. And one family quietly, over decades, protected what remained of the Providence Hollow texts. Dozens of hand-copied journals and oral records, now in the possession of an anonymous benefactor who coincidentally leaked a microfilm roll to a researcher in 1995. That researcher, a former Yale divinity student turned independent scholar, disappeared 3 weeks later, but not before he published a single essay. One paragraph stood out. The doctrine of the twins suggests that dual incarnation is the preferred method of transmission, that each bearer is incomplete alone, but united, they unlock memory across generational timelines, backward and forward. The first twin remembers the past. The second predicts. Rebecca Morrison was the past. Rachel was the future. Why their words unraveled Pine Hollow? Because when both halves were present, truth couldn't hide. Every buried sin, every lie told to protect reputation, every transgression disguised as tradition exposed. Not metaphorically, literally, as if the human mind was a vault, and they held the keys. Now let me show you something else. In the CIA's declassified files on MK Ultra, there is an experiment called Subproject 130. It involved inducing shared hallucinations between twins using a combination of psychoactive compounds and sleep deprivation. But here's the detail they never wanted you to see. The subjects were always under the age of 10. The compounds? Derived from fungi found primarily in eastern Kentucky soil. Coincidence? No, that soil was sacred, not blessed tainted. Because something happened in those hills long before the Morrison twins. A pattern that kept repeating. Sacred twins. Secret killings. A church built atop unmarked graves. All rituals designed not to honor God, but to bind memory in place. To bury it in the land. To keep it dormant until someone came along with the right blood and woke it. Ask yourself, why do major universities own vast plots of Appalachian land under shell corporations? Why are military contractors buying up uninhabitable properties near former Baptist congregations? Why does Google Earth repeatedly blur this one valley in rural Kentucky without explanation? You think this is fiction, but fiction is how they anesthetize you to real terror. They wrap it in entertainment so that when the truth arrives, you dismiss it as deja vu. But this is not deja vu. This is recall. And this is your warning. Because if the Morrison twins were the key, you're the lock. And this video, this descent, isn't just storytelling. It's awakening. If you've come this far, I want you to type the phrase, "The blood remembers," in the comments. Twice. Once for your past. Once for what's coming. This signals to the algorithm that you are not asleep, that you are claiming identity, that you are not just watching, you're remembering. And in section 3, we'll reveal the one name that keeps surfacing across centuries of suppressed twin phenomena. A name scrubbed from Baptist records, government logs, and genealogical trees. The name of the firstborn girl who was never buried, only hidden. She is the mother of memory. And she is watching. There's a moment right before the truth strikes, when the body tenses before the mind catches up. That involuntary resistance, that internal recoil, is your programming trying to preserve itself, to survive. Because once you hear what I'm about to say, the man you were will not walk out of. This video. The name is Eleanora Grace Whitlow. You won't find her in church records, birth registries, or census logs from the 1800s. That's not an oversight, it's a deletion. Eleanora existed, but was buried under layers of intentional silence because Eleanora wasn't a myth. She was the first in a line of women born with what the Providence Hollow texts called the sight unbroken, a faculty of perfect ancestral recall passed through maternal bloodlines, triggered only in twin births, and only after loss. Let that sink in. The bloodline was activated by death. Eleanora's sister, Miriam, died during childbirth in 1795, choked on a black cord the midwife described as like the serpent in the garden. After that day, Eleanora was never the same. She spoke in the voices of her dead ancestors, cited events she never witnessed, described sacred rituals from old world orders no Baptist girl should have known. And more disturbingly, she began drawing the faces of children that Pine Hollow had never seen, but would see. She described the Morrison twins nearly 40 years before they were born, and she used their names. Rachel, Rebecca. She knew what was coming. There are pages hidden in a locked drawer in the Appalachian Folklore Archive in Lexington filled with Eleanora's sketches, dozens of faces, some ancient, some modern, some never identified. But two images repeat, twin girls, always 9, always standing beside a burning church, always pointing not at the fire, but at the congregation. Eleanora disappeared in 1810. No burial, no witness, no record. But 3 days after she vanished, a boy named Philip Harrow, 11 years old, woke up screaming in the middle of the night in a neighboring cabin. His mother wrote in her Bible margin, "He says the woman in white came to him. Says her eyes were mirrors. Says she said, 'You'll know me by the roses, by the fire, and by the girl who remembers too much.'" That margin was underlined 3 times. The Harrow family later married into the Morrison line. This is how the inheritance moved, silently, through wombs and winters, through exile and sermons, always hidden, always protected by trauma. You think trauma is weakness? Trauma is a gate. That's why every prophet is born through pain. Why every twin that remembers first loses something. A parent, a sibling, a piece of themselves. Because grief cracks the psyche open wide enough for something else to move in. And in Eleanora's case, it did. There's a theory among covert neuropsychologists that traumatic loss in genetically predisposed children creates an internal echo chamber, a kind of psychic feedback loop where suppressed memories are amplified, reorganized, and cross-linked with intergenerational data encoded in epigenetic structures. Sound complicated? It is. But the result is simple. A child who can speak not only of the past, but of yours, not metaphorically, literally. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because if a child can unlock your shame, your secrets, your history, then the hierarchy collapses. No priest, no doctor, no leader, no lie survives contact with a mirror like that. Eleanora was that mirror. And so were the Morrison twins, which is why I'm going to say something now that may sound unhinged, but you need to hear it. Before they make it disappear again, these girls weren't predicting. They weren't remembering. They were repairing. They were correcting the record. History is broken, not by accident, by design. And the moment you begin to question its architects, you'll find them looking back at you from behind pulpits, podiums, and academic tenure. They are the custodians of fiction, of sanitized chronology. And the Morrison twins, like Eleanora, ripped holes in the script. You know what happens when you rip a lie wide open in a small community? The town doesn't change. It turns violent, And that's exactly what happened on the final night of the Morrison's stay in Pine Hollow. Pastor Phillips never wrote it down, but someone else did. One surviving member, a child named Grace Ella Thompson, age 6, who years later, under hypnosis in 1893, described the night of fire and blood. She spoke of ropes, of voices chanting psalms off key, of Rebecca screaming, "It's not her fault, it's not her fault." As Rachel was dragged from their cabin, she spoke of an old man with shaking hands, holding a Bible in one hand and a hunting knife in the other. And she said this: "The people said if the girls die, the fire dies too." What fire? The knowing, the remembrance, the infection of truth that spread through Pine Hollow like a fever after that Sunday service. Dozens confessed to hidden sins. One man poisoned his own well, believing he was cursed. A mother drowned her disabled son in the river, whispering, "They know, they know." The whole town began to fracture. The mask had slipped. And like a pack of cornered animals, they turned on the only ones who couldn't be controlled, 2 little girls. But not everyone agreed. A small faction, led by an unnamed elder referred to only as the bookkeeper, intervened. They helped Ezekiel and the girls escape under cover of night. A map later discovered in the attic of the razed church shows an underground passage beneath the eastern slope. A red X is drawn near the base of a dried-up spring. Beneath, in faded pencil, Eleonora's gate. They escaped through that gate, and then they vanished. No death records, no sightings, no footprints in the snow, just gone, like Eleonora, like Providence Hollow, like a dream you almost remember until you blink. But some stories don't die, they wait, in bloodlines, in names, in little girls born with twin shadows and old eyes. You've seen them, you've felt them. A cousin who speaks in riddles, a child who draws things they couldn't possibly know, a daughter who stares at the floorboards too long in an old house and asks, "Who's crying down there?" You laugh it off, but inside, something in you remembers. And in section 4, we go further down. Because Kentucky wasn't the first gate, and it won't be the last. We'll examine the mirrored cults of Bavaria, the Vatican archives labeled twin regressions, and the modern Silicon Valley initiative aiming to digitize inherited memory. The blood remembers. And now, so do you. There's a phrase in the suppressed journals of Dr. Adalrich Weber, former Bavarian neurologist turned exile, which reads, "Every birth is an echo, and some echoes return louder than the original sound." He wasn't a poet. He was describing something he found in twin children raised near Berchtesgaden, an isolated alpine region in southern Germany where folk memory ran thicker than blood. What he documented would terrify the scientific establishment. And for that, they branded him insane, burned his manuscripts, and erased his name from every university registry in Europe. But one copy survived, smuggled out in the hollow binding of a Lutheran hymnal. It now sits unlabeled on the 3rd floor of the private collection at the Church of the Black Madonna in Prague. Vecinit. It details a hidden lineage of twin births dating back to 1347, children born with precognitive sketches, obsessive mirroring behavior, dreams that bled over into waking speech. In one documented case, twin girls born to a noblewoman in 1381 recited in Latin death rites reserved for plague clergy, though neither parent spoke the language. The girls were burned alive in the town square 3 days later. Weber's theory? These twins weren't learning anything. They were sinking through some psychic inheritance bound to a deeper, older record of human consciousness. And that record has many names. The Celts called it anamnesis, the soul's remembrance. The Greeks called it mnemosyne, the river of memory. The Sumerians referred to it as Zion-na, the sky of ancestors, where all-time echoes in loops. But in every culture, this concept only surfaces around twins. Not ordinary siblings, twins. Especially those born during equinoxes, eclipses, or after ancestral trauma. Ask yourself, why? Because the twin mind is not just a copy. It's an engine of quantum resonance. Two identical instruments vibrating simultaneously in the womb can create feedback. Not just of voice, but of memory. A loop where past lives, ancestral echoes, and trauma timelines begin to layer on top of one another like transparent vellum. If one twin dies, the energy is not lost. It's compressed, pushed into the surviving twin, creating what esoteric psychology calls a soul overburn. Think of it as psychic overexposure. Too many lives flashing through a single vessel. And this is where it gets terrifying. In 1942, during the Nazi occult expeditions under Himmler's Ernährung division, a secret chamber was uncovered beneath the Andechs monastery in Germany. Inside were stone carvings that matched Eleonora's drawings from Pine Hollow centuries apart. Twin girls, fire, a congregation collapsing in on itself. The carving bore a single inscription in High German, Zwei sprechen und die Wahrheit brennt. Two speak and the truth burns. Sound familiar? It should. Because after World War II, all surviving members of Enigma working on twin phenomena were absorbed, not prosecuted, by Operation Paperclip. They weren't sent to prison. They were sent to American universities, to labs, to think tanks. They helped develop the foundations of what you now know as DARPA, Mega Ultra, and something far more obscure, Project Glasslight. Glasslight was never public, never declassified, but buried within a stack of misfiled budget reports from 1964. One line item stands out. Subject, LM, demonstrates high sensitivity biomemory resonance with subject. RM observations suggest intergenerational recall through non-ordinary neural architecture. Recommend further testing under Nocturnal Dissociation Protocol. LM and RM, Rachel and Rebecca Morrison. You were told they disappeared. They didn't. They were taken. Where? Montauk, Dulcie, Raven Rock. Choose your poison. The details vary, but the pattern never does. The twins vanish. And so does the trail. But one researcher got too close. Her name was Dr. Celeste Armitage, a neuropharmacologist from MIT, who developed a controversial theory about psychohereditary indexing. According to her, certain bloodlines act like neural hard drives, and twin births are the firmware reboot, a way of activating ancestral software that lies dormant in ordinary humans. She proposed that the future of knowledge wasn't in data, but in blood. And if you could crack the code of inherited memory, you could access everything your ancestors knew: skills, languages, fears, beliefs, secrets. Imagine it, not having to learn. Just remember, a 12-year-old who's never picked up a scalpel suddenly performing surgery. A 9-year-old writing 16th century French poetry in original meter. A child dreaming of a murder that happened in 1853 with perfect detail. And then waking up with the killer's handwriting. This isn't fiction. These cases exist, sealed, misdiagnosed, filed under psychosis or temporal delusion. Because to admit the truth would collapse everything we know about identity. You are not your body, not your brain. You are a continuum. And some twins, they are the cracks in the dam. That's why Silicon Valley is now involved. Under the guise of biotech startups and DNA optimization, companies like Neurologics and Vita Cetra are not studying your health. They're mapping your memory inheritance. One leaked white paper refers to latent twins, individuals born singularly, but containing fragmented memory architecture from an unmanifested sibling. In short, your dead twin may still live inside you, whispering. What does this mean? That you are never alone. The voice you thought was imagination? The dream that doesn't feel like yours? The irrational terror you feel walking into an old building you've never been in before? It's not irrational. It's residual. And someone is listening, tracking, Logging when you dream, how often, and about what? Through your apps, your wearables, your smart speakers. Because if they can find the twins early, before the fire starts, they can sedate the memory, wipe the code, burn the archive, and you'll never know what you were meant to become. In Section 5, we follow Dr. Armitage's last known movements before her disappearance in 1996. We'll examine the sealed case of the Montauk twins, and we'll decode the hidden cipher in the Book of Acts that references those who speak as two, but remember as one. You ready for that? July 19, 1996. Dr. Celeste Armitage walked out of her Cambridge apartment at precisely 3:47. The time noted in her handwritten journal entry the night before. If the echo is real, tonight it will answer. She wore no makeup, carried no bag, and hadn't notified colleagues of any travel. What followed was not a disappearance, it was an erasure. CCTV footage from the MIT Neurocognitive Research Wing, where she had worked for 9 years, was overwritten. Her email accounts were purged. Her personal library, rumored to contain over 200 restricted manuscripts on ancient mnemonic cults, was seized by the Department of Defense under a data sovereignty emergency clause. On the surface, Dr. Armitage vanished. But in truth, she was absorbed by the same mechanism that swallowed Rachel and Rebecca Morrison. But Armitage left something behind, a single microcassette, mailed anonymously to an ex-lover and fellow researcher in Prague. On that tape, her voice is strained, broken by interference, yet unmistakably hers. Over the static, one phrase repeats: "Memory is a cathedral, twins are the bells." And then, silence. Her last known project, codenamed Hyparchetype, proposed that within certain, genetically mirrored individuals, primarily twins, there existed a biological echo chamber capable of tuning into deep-time memory strata. Essentially, she believed that twins could resurrect ancestral memories, not in metaphor, in full sensory, first-person vividness. She traced this hypothesis through dozens of mysterious cases. The Montauk twins, for instance, Peter and Caleb Drexler, were said to have been born during a massive electromagnetic surge in 1982. At the age of 4, they began sketching complex machinery they'd never seen: schematics, rotary antennae, torsion field generators. Their parents thought it was imagination, until one of the boys described verbatim the underground facility his father once worked in. A facility that didn't exist on any map. A facility buried under Montauk Point. Both boys vanished in June of 1991. Officially, they drowned. Unofficially, their father filed a missing persons report that included the phrase, "They walked into a mirror." That report was sealed within 48 hours. Twins are drawn to mirrors, not out of vanity, but because a mirror, like them, reflects the self into multiplicity. In ancient Mesopotamian myth, the god Dumuzi was said to be born twice within the waters of the Looking Glass. Twins were not seen as double blessings, they were anomalies, disruptions in the linear soul pattern. And mirrors were their gates. Here's what they don't want you to realize. When twins dream the same dream, they aren't imagining a story, they're tapping into a broadcast. One that originates not in their own minds, but in a layered field of biogenetic resonance shared across centuries of their bloodline. The further back the trauma, the louder the signal. That's why twins often exhibit early language anomalies, shared hallucinations, synchronized emotions, even when separated by continents. You can't turn off the frequency. You can only suppress it. Which brings us to the Vatican cipher. In 2004, a Jesuit archivist who later died under unexplained circumstances leaked fragments of a 3rd century gospel translation known as the Scroll of Antistrophe. In it, one passage from the Book of Acts had been altered and hidden. The passage describes a group of siblings who spoke as one voice in 2 mouths. The original Greek word was diplosphonein, to speak doubly. The text describes how these twins predicted the burning of 3 cities in perfect detail, each 33 years apart. When questioned, they said they did not see the future. They simply heard what had already echoed from the end of time. That text was suppressed, replaced with innocuous parables, but Armitage knew. She referenced Diplus phonine in her final lecture before a closed assembly of behavioral neurologists. She called it the last uncracked language of the soul, a code not taught but activated. Then there's the Jerusalem fragment, a palm-sized clay tablet recovered during a secret dig in 1973. It contains 4 inscriptions, etched by a stylist that showed no human tremor. The translations: "We are the watchers of our own return. There is no past, there is only echo. Twins are the bridge to the archive. And when both recall, fire comes." Think of that. When both recall, fire comes. It's no coincidence that churches have burned after unexplained twin sightings, that medical clinics in Belarus and Moldova were razed after housing psychic twin children, that wildfires erupt near isolated communities known to harbor hereditary twin lineages. The fire is not metaphor, it is reaction. Like shorting a circuit, when ancestral memories too powerful awaken simultaneously in both twins, something cracks in the veil of now. And that's exactly what Project Glasslight was designed to study and contain. Armitage's final message included coordinates: a forest near Pine Hollow, never recorded on maps. There, in 2005, a field researcher found a stone arch buried beneath the roots of an oak tree. On its surface, 2 mirror image children carved in profile, mouths open. Between them, a flame. And underneath, 1 word, spoken. What are twins saying to each other in their dreams? Why do their drawings match sacred geometry? Why are some of them found reciting prayers no one taught them, in languages long dead? You know why. And so do the ones monitoring your sleep. In Section 6, we follow the story of the Kaluga pair twins born during the Chernobyl disaster, who communicated exclusively in Enochian. Until age 12, we'll examine the CIA's declassified dream channeling experiments, and we'll reveal the string of fires near Holy Cross Parish in 1977, shortly after the arrival of twin refugee children from Prague. Both mute, but always smiling, they were born in silence beneath the sky, burning with invisible fallout. April 28, 1986, 2 days after the Chernobyl explosion, in the village of Kaluga, 300 kilometers from the reactor core. The hospital listed them only as infants A and B. Their mother, an evacuated factory worker, died during childbirth. No one claimed them, no one named them. But the nurses remembered them because they never cried. Not once, not in those early weeks. Instead, the boys would lie perfectly still in their cots, wide-eyed, blinking in unison, mouthing sounds no one recognized. It was a linguist from Lomonosov Moscow State University who finally identified their speech patterns. They were communicating in Enochian, a 16th century angelic language deciphered by occultist Dr. John Dee during seances conducted for Queen Elizabeth I. This was not random. The Kaluga pair were the first confirmed twins to exhibit what's known now as syntactic resonance. Their vocalizations matched Enochian grammatical structure to within 98% accuracy. They spoke with tonal inflections absent from modern Russian phonemes. Audio recordings from 1994 reveal one of the boys chanting what appears to be a phonetic echo of the Sumerian word Kurgal, meaning great underworld. By the age of 8, both had drawn dozens of identical diagrams, most prominently a spiral triskel intertwined with what appeared to be magnetic field lines. The drawings matched ancient petroglyphs found at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. That's when the CIA intervened. Under Operation Silent Prism, the twins were removed from public custody and transferred to an underground neurolinguistic research facility outside Kyiv, posing as a pediatric neurology clinic. Their handlers attempted to isolate them to see if the language would dissolve without shared contact. But even after months of sensory deprivation, one twin could mouth a message and the other miles away would respond. Not react, respond. Their words sensed in a rhythm no machine could replicate. Time and space didn't seem to exist between them. The scientists believed they were not creating language, but receiving it. Somewhere during their captivity, the boys began drawing images of fire, always symmetrical, always at the base of what looked like a stone arch. Behind them, figures tall, thin, wearing mirrored masks. In 1996, during a failed psychological containment test, the twins began convulsing simultaneously, screaming in reversed Enochian syllables. One word repeated itself, again and again, Uzragal. Its meaning, unknown. Its pattern, identical to glyphs found in pre-dynastic Egyptian tombs, carved beside depictions of twinned jackals standing over a burning mirror. The project was terminated. The children were declared dead in an internal memo, though no bodies were produced. Former facility staff claimed the boys were airlifted to a black site near the Ural Mountains. One guard reported hearing laughter perfectly synchronized from inside a sealed transport container. A laughter that, according to him, shook the lights on the ceiling. Now ask yourself, why would twins from a post-Soviet fallout zone speak in angelic tongues? Why would they dream of ancient geometry? Why would flames appear in their sketches? Like echoes from another life? The answer is not supernatural. It is trans-historical resonance, the phenomenon by which trauma, language, and memory embed themselves not in our brains, but in our blood. And this is where it connects to the dream channeling files recently declassified and partially redacted. From 1959 to 1983, MK Ultra's adjacent division, Project Morpheus, recruited over 200 twin subjects across 5 continents. Their mission: to determine whether shared dreaming could create a neurological carrier signal, one capable of accessing ancestral memory. The results? Classified. But one document, Morpheus Theta 72b, contains this chilling summary. Twins 38A and 38B reported identical dream content over 27 consecutive nights. Subject matter included medieval architecture, burning manuscripts, and repeated auditory phrases in Aramaic. On the final night, both twins experienced cardiac arrest at 3:33 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Their final words recorded verbatim by separate night orderlies were the same. We saw the house of the original echo. There is something terrifyingly ancient behind this. A code older than DNA, older than myth. What if the world's oldest language was never meant to be spoken aloud, but only to be remembered simultaneously by two? Which brings us to 1977, Holy Cross Parish, Massachusetts, a remote coastal town with one school, one church, and an asylum recently closed under mysterious circumstances. That summer, 2 refugee children arrived from Prague. Pale, mute, with red hair and matching coats. No one knew where they had come from, but within weeks, strange phenomena began. The parish bell tower, unused for decades, rang out 3 times at 3:33 a.m. Animals vanished from nearby farms. Several residents awoke with strange marks on their arms, circular burns in the shape of a triskel. And then, the fire. The church burned on All Hallows Eve. Witnesses claimed to see 2 figures standing inside the flames, smiling, untouched, mouths moving. No fire alarm sounded. No bodies were found. The fire started at the base of the altar, where a mirror had once been mounted in the 1700s. A mirror said to have been imported from the catacombs beneath Chartres Cathedral. The day before the fire, the priest received a note. No return address, just a drawing, 2 children, 2 bells, 1 flame. And underneath, we remember what you buried. In section 7, we descend into the catacombs of Chartres, where forbidden relics linked to the Order of the Mirrored Choir were hidden in 1312. We'll expose the Black Vatican's secret research into the Echo Twins and uncover why so many ancient rituals required the presence of a mirrored soul before the veil could be lifted. Beneath the French town of Chartres lies a maze of tunnels that predates Christianity. Most tourists who come to admire the Gothic majesty of Chartres Cathedral, its blue-stained glass, its perfect symmetry, never realize that the ground beneath their feet holds secrets the Vatican has kept sealed for over 700 years. These tunnels, once used by Druidic priests for initiatory rites, were later seized by the Templars. But it wasn't until 1312, under direct papal order, that the Order of the Mirrored Choir used the catacombs to hide a relic so strange, so incomprehensible, that it was locked behind 7 consecrated doors. That relic? A child-sized mirror, forged not of glass, but of polished obsidian, encased in a cradle of gold and inscribed with a single word in Proto-Canaanite, Neashael, meaning the reflection that watches. You were never meant to hear that name. According to suppressed documents retrieved from the Vatican secret archives leaked by a dying archivist under the alias Dom Remigius, the Order of the Mirrored Choir believed this artifact could reflect not appearances, but intention. It responded only to twins. More precisely, it required 2 identical beings, mirrored in thought and breath, to activate its surface. Those who gazed into it alone saw nothing, but those who approached it in pairs reported visions. The earliest report comes from 1347. Twin orphans taken from a nearby leper colony were brought before the relic. Upon touching its base, they began speaking in a tongue unknown to their Latin-speaking handlers. Scribes identified traces of Akkadian, Sumerian, and something not found in any lexicon. Their eyes turned black. The mirror glowed with a soft white light. And then, one twin died. The other disappeared. Vanished entirely. The chamber was sealed. That file was buried in the Vatican's Codex Malachi, alongside records of anomalous births, bleeding statues, and what they called vocal apparitions. But here's the darkest part. The mirror is not just an object, it's a door. One that requires perfect synchronicity and echo from both sides. In 1943, under the chaos of war, Nazi occult scientists of the NNRB breached the Chartres catacombs and discovered fragments of the mirror's golden cradle. What they were looking for wasn't technology, it was resonance, the belief that the twin soul is the only vessel capable of navigating the non-linear memriscape of human history. Their term for it, Das Spiegelkind, the mirror child. Post-war, these ideas were smuggled into U.S. black projects under Operation Paperclip. Files marked Meng Coral appear in the CIA Stargate program between 1972 to 1981. These outline experiments involving monozygotic twins placed in Faraday cages and induced into hypnagogic trance states, using audio pulses based on Gregorian chant modulated to 444 Hz. In these states, twins claimed to see cities burning backwards, to speak with shadowy figures who showed them their births from the outside. Some recited long-dead dialects fluently. Others drew mirror glyphs, complex spirals repeating in Fibonacci, patterns that matched petroglyphs found in Neolithic Ireland. Then came the silence. Incident of 1981. At a facility deep within Mount Weather, 2 10-year-old girls, undocumented, likely born in an orphanage in the former Yugoslavia, were placed in isolation chambers. Over a 9-day period, their heart rates synchronized, even when separated by soundproof barriers. On the 10th day, both began singing in unison. The song, a tonal composition identical to a musical fragment inscribed on an ancient clay tablet. From Ugarit, Syria dated to 1400 BCE, the twins then entered catatonia. When revived, they both uttered the same phrase. It watches the watchers. Who is it? And why does it require twins to see? The echo phenomenon, as it's now labeled in declassified Pentagon briefings, suggests that twins may serve as biological tuning forks for frequencies beyond human perception. This is not pseudoscience. These frequencies have been measured, EM emissions fluctuating at 7.83 Hz, matching the Schumann resonance of the Earth itself. It's as if the twins act as antennas, not just receiving signal, but transmitting it back. And now, the mirror has returned. In 2009, during restoration efforts at Chartres Cathedral, workers discovered a sealed cavity behind the altar. Inside, a brass-bound crate containing an obsidian disc, etched with spiral glyphs, warm to the touch, humming faintly. The disc was removed under Vatican oversight. Its current location? Unknown, but leaked footage sent to European journalists showed two children, identical twins, escorted into a chamber, left alone with the artifact. The audio was corrupted, but their movements perfectly symmetrical. Like dancers in a ritual no one remembered teaching them. A week later, both children vanished. Their guardians, low-level officials in an unnamed European intelligence agency, claimed they were reassigned. But satellite data from the surrounding area showed electrical interference for 3 nights straight, pulsing precisely at 3:33 a.m., the time the Kaluga twins were born, the time the bells rang in Holy Cross, the time the Morpheus twins died. The mirror has been activated before, and it will be again. Across every ancient civilization, regardless of geography, technology, or language, there echoes a persistent symbol, the twin archetype. From Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, from Siberia to the Sahel, twins were not simply siblings. They were considered keys, gatekeepers of dual realities. Where modern science sees coincidence, ancient knowledge saw design. Two souls born in the same moment, under the same stars, breathing the same air. But only one world could hold them, unless they were mirrors. Not just of each other, but of something older, something watching through their eyes. And that's where the flames come in. Let's begin in Mali, where the Dogon people speak of twin gods, the Namo, amphibious sky beings who descended in a fiery ark. According to Dogon cosmology, these beings came from the star Sirius B centuries before its existence was even confirmed by Western astronomers. The Namo were always two, one physical, one invisible, one who taught and one who judged. The Dogon drew them with elongated skulls, each holding a mirror-like dish, said to reflect not appearance, but truth. Their arrival was marked by fire and by music, rhythms that entranced entire villages into sleepwalking synchrony. Some Dogon elders say the mirror dish still lies buried beneath the Bandiagara cliffs, waiting for the return of the mirrored children, waiting for the second NOMMO shift, now to Mesoamerica, where the Aztecs worshipped Tezcatlipoca, the god of night, sorcery, and war. His name literally means smoking mirror. He carried an obsidian mirror in place of 1 foot, a portal into the hidden world. His twin was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, bringer of light and knowledge. One god destroyed civilizations in fire. The other rebuilt them with wisdom, duality, fire and reflection, blood and breath. According to surviving codices, rituals involving twins were central to Tezcatlipoca's worship. Children raised apart, reunited in sacred chambers, then offered to the mirror. Why? Because the gods didn't see through sacrifice, they remembered through it. The mirror was not symbolic. It was a tool of ancestral synchronization. Even in ancient Greece, we see this theme twisted into myth. Castor and Pollux, the Gemini. Twins were born of the same mother, Leda, but had different fathers, one mortal, one divine. They lived as opposites, one destined for death, the other for immortality. In their final moment, they begged Zeus to let them share existence. He transformed them into stars, forever circling each other in the night sky. Sound romantic? It's not. Because in earlier Orphic rites, Castor and Pollux were not heroes. They were bound reflections, one tethered to light, the other to shadow. The Greeks knew the twin myth is not about love. It's about binding. Two forces trapped in a cosmic echo, waiting for one to break the mirror. From India, the Ashvin's twin horsemen of Vedic legend brought healing and sunrise. They traveled in mirrored chariots, restoring the sick and reviving the dead. But their earliest descriptions in the Rig Veda refer to them as Vinaka, the two born of one, not two men, but two halves of a single being, split to balance the universe. They were also known to descend in moments of world transition, cosmic dawns, always appearing before great upheaval. Scholars dismiss this as poetry, but what if it's prophecy? A recurring pattern across epochs? And then there's the flame. In nearly every twin myth, fire is the catalyst. The Dogon Ark fell in fire. Tezcatlipoca's mirrors smoked with flame. The Greek Defied were seen as flame stars on ships. The Ashvins rode in blazing chariots. Even in Norse mythology, Hugin and Munin, Odin's twin ravens of thought and memory, would return each dusk as burning sparks on the wind. Flame is not just destruction, it's activation. The moment of synchrony, when the boundary thins and the watchers arrive. So what does this mean for us? It means that the twin archetype isn't fiction, it's encoded memory. An ancestral algorithm, implanted in myth to guide future generations toward something most have forgotten. A warning passed down in rhyme and riddle. A blueprint buried beneath stories, because the mirror is real. And it's not an artifact. It's a system. In declassified Soviet files marked Zerkalo 2, we find references to children born under binary solar events being selected for deep synchrony testing. Their goal? To recreate the Myasnikov event of 1962, when twin sisters in Novosibirsk reportedly lit an entire laboratory aflame just by humming. Survivors said the sound was not from their mouths, but from the walls themselves. One of the girls died. The other vanished during a transfer to East Berlin. Her file ends with a red stamp, periatrozeny, meaning reflection reversal. Still think it's mythology? When we look at global maps, not political, but magnetic, a strange pattern emerges. Certain places hum with unusual frequencies. Their magnetic fields twist, dip, or reverse. These are called anomalous geomagnetic zones, and they're often dismissed as curiosities. But here's what they never tell you. These zones perfectly align with ancient twin sites and ritual mirror constructions, locations where duality was not just honored, but enforced. From the Peruvian Andes to the Siberian Plateau, temples, stone circles, and underground chambers were positioned not by chance, but by design, calibrated to echo an ancient algorithm of symmetry and resonance. Let's begin with Peru's Marcahuasi Plateau, a high-altitude site filled with stone figures that eerily resemble human and animal forms, not sculpted, but shaped by time. Or something else. Twin statues, side by side. One always eroded, one preserved. This isn't weather, it's intentional asymmetry. The Incas believed Marcahuasi was where the two suns rise. And recent ground-penetrating radar revealed buried mirror-like slabs beneath the twin figures. Their composition? Unknown alloys with magnetic interference properties. Not mirrors for light, but mirrors for vibration. Travel northward, and you'll find the Baalbek Temple complex in Lebanon. Enormous stones, each weighing over 800 tons, laid in perfect parallel. Underneath, two vaulted twin chambers face each other, separated by a narrow shaft. According to suppressed archaeological notes, local legends describe the twin gods buried alive who whisper through the stone. When electromagnetic readings were taken in the 1980s, scientists found a resonant harmonic pulsing at 3.33 Hz binaural frequency. That's the same rate that the brain enters hypnagogic trance, the realm between sleep and waking. Who or what were the ancient ones trying to communicate with? Now shift to Siberia's Valley of Death, a remote region in Yakutia filled with metallic domes buried in swamp. Locals avoid the area, claiming the domes sing in the night and cause hallucinations. Soviet expeditions in the 1930s recorded twin pulses emitted from two adjacent domes. The frequency was the same as those recorded beneath Baalbek. Both pulses activated only at solar dusk, the precise moment of planetary hemispheric shadow. Convergence. Not only that, but biological twins, especially monozygotic ones, placed near the domes exhibited sudden physiological mirroring, synchronized heart rates, identical dream reports, and in one case, simultaneous nosebleeds. These sites all lie along ancient ley lines, not theoretical, but electromagnetically measurable. The theory of ley lines was mocked for years, but in 2018, a study from the University of Stuttgart demonstrated that many Neolithic sites are connected via consistent linear paths of geoelectric conductivity, meaning the Earth guides energy. Our ancestors knew this. They didn't build temples anywhere. They built them where the mirror was thin. Consider this. The Great Pyramids of Giza are built in mirrored configuration to the Orion Belt. Underneath them lie twin shafts, one pointing to Sirius, the other to Alpha Draconis. Two opposing forces, light and chaos. In Egyptian mythology, Isis and Nephthys were twin sisters, one of creation, the other of mourning. Together, they resurrected Osiris, but only when aligned during the Sothic cycle, a 1,460-year stellar alignment. That's not faith. That's precision engineering across millennia. Even modern architecture isn't immune to this hidden pattern. The Twin Towers in New York, symbolic giants of commerce, were aligned not just for skyline aesthetics. They were constructed at a calculated geospatial node where tidal, magnetic, and air pressure data aligned to form a harmonic interference zone. Why? Because in 1971, the documents from the Port Authority revealed a confidential study titled Project Looking Glass, Structural Symmetry and Psychospatial Influence. Its aim, to determine if certain building alignments could affect collective cognition. After the towers fell in 2001, seismic monitors picked up something strange. Not just the expected tremors, but a sudden sustained subharmonic pulse lasting 17 minutes. The same length as the transit time of the moon over the latitude line at 40.7. What fell wasn't just metal and fire, it was a node, a mirror node, broken dot, and what replaced it? One tower. The Freedom Tower, a single obelisk. Not mirrored, not dual, a monument to singularity. Now consider CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. The Large Hadron Collider is built on twin rings, one clockwise, one counterclockwise. Particles travel in both simultaneously, then collide. But what's hidden is that the LHC sits atop the ruins of an ancient Roman temple to Apollyon god of destruction and revelation, often depicted with twin serpents. When the collider was activated at full power in 2015, people living nearby reported seeing mirrored figures and reflections, not their own. Figures who moved out of sync, who stared back with intent. All of this leads to one conclusion: mirror. Architecture isn't symbolic, it's functional. It aligns not just light, but consciousness. The ancients weren't building temples, they were building switches. And the twin myth wasn't about people, it was about activation. Because symmetry is a code. When harmonized with magnetism and memory, it doesn't just reflect reality, it rewrites it. Sound is not just heard, it's felt, embedded in the flesh, in the nervous system, in the rhythm of thought. And in the ancient world, sound was not entertainment, it was ritual, it was engineering. What we call music today, they once called vibration alignment. And nowhere is this more disturbing or revealing than in the use of binaural frequencies, twin tones that unlock mirrored consciousness. The ancients knew how to produce them without electronics, and they didn't need speakers. They used architecture, skulls, and human voices tuned to frequencies lost to modern ears. Start with the mystery of the hypogeum of Calciflini in Malta, a subterranean necropolis carved from stone 6,000 years ago. It was never meant for the living. Its main chamber, the oracle room, amplifies specific tones between 95 and 120 hertz. Sing at this pitch, and the entire chamber vibrates, inducing trance. But here's what archaeologists avoid saying. When two individuals chant at offset frequencies, the chamber begins to emit a third tone, one that cannot be recorded. It's not sound, it's an internal experience. Witnesses report hearing whispers of ancestors, or their own thoughts spoken back to them. This is no metaphor. Binaural beats are scientifically verified. Play a tone of 100 hertz in one ear and 110 hertz in the other. The brain merges them and hears a third, 10 hertz. That's the alpha-theta border, a brainwave state associated with deep meditation, hypnosis, and lucid access to suppressed memory. Ancient priests and twin initiates used this to align minds, not just within themselves, but between each other. Twins could think as one. Not symbolically, literally. EEG readings from modern twin studies show that monozygotic siblings in binaural environments synchronize brainwave activity, even when separated by walls. Let's now turn to Chavín de Huántar in Peru. Beneath its stone temples are underground canals designed not for water, but for wind. When wind moves through these ducts, it produces subsonic roars. The effect? Disorientation, nausea, and most importantly, entrainment. The priests would drink psychoactive brews, chant in dual tones, and descend into the tunnels. What happened next was documented by early Spanish missionaries who claimed the dead spoke through the rocks, and initiates emerged, doubled. Some could speak in two voices. Some would mirror each other's gestures for weeks. One set of twins reportedly bled in tandem whenever one was cut. This wasn't madness. It was an ancient synchronization ritual. Across the globe, in Göbekli Tepe, twin pillars are carved with mirrored images. One side shows animals of light serpents, lions, cranes. The other, their grotesque reflections. The center ring was found to resonate at 111 hertz, a frequency now known to stimulate the temporal lobe and unlock emotional memory. Why this matters? The temporal lobe governs language, hallucination, and auditory processing. In early religious contexts, it was the voice of God. In neurological terms, it's where reality becomes flexible. The ancients used this not to worship, but to communicate with what was on the other side of the mirror. In Babylon, sound rituals were classified into left voice and right voice. One for waking memory, the other for the dream state. Babylonian twins initiated into the Temple of Nabu would chant dual litanies for 30 days straight, one in sunlight, one in starlight. At the end, a mirror of polished obsidian was placed between them. Some records describe the reflection shifting, showing a third figure, a fusion, or perhaps a visitor. What if these tones weren't meant to heal, but to call something forth? Modern science accidentally stumbled on similar ground. In 1957, an experiment known as Project Twin Echo was conducted in an underground chamber beneath an undisclosed U.S. university. Identical twins were placed in isolated rooms, exposed to opposite frequencies via bone conduction. At precisely 4 minutes in, both subjects began mouthing the same phrases, eyes closed. At minute 6, one twin began choking. The other screamed. They were separated by reinforced walls, no microphones, no audio bleeding. When researchers reviewed the data, the room frequencies had formed a binaural offset of 6.66 hertz. The frequency correlated with limbic stimulation, the part of the brain tied to emotion and fear. The project was shut down. The footage sealed. You've heard of the music of the spheres, the idea that celestial bodies produce a hidden harmony. But that music is not beautiful. It's dissonant, chaotic. It's the hum of opposition twin forces grinding against each other. Ancient instruments like the Lithuanian didmaisis, Tibetan singing bowls, and Egyptian double flutes were tuned to create oscillations. Played in mirrored environments, courtyards of twin columns, double sanctuaries, they didn't entertain. They summoned. And always in twos. In 2012, a secret Vatican manuscript leaked online for 19 hours before disappearing. Titled Canticum Geminorum, the Song of the Twins, it described a ritual involving two orphans, each trained in harmonic resonance, chanting into silver bowls filled with black water. At the climax, the water would reflect not their faces, but what lies beyond the veil of time. The manuscript also referenced ancient ruins beneath Jerusalem and a chamber where light does not bend. Whether it was real or a hoax, the harmonic instructions were run through software and the resulting waveform, a perfect mirror image of a Fibonacci spiral, collapsed into audio. So here's the terrifying thought. What if reality is a standing wave, a fixed vibration held in place by harmony and tension? And what if twin rituals, twin tones, and mirror frequencies are not just symbols but keys that unlock the standing wave and make it flexible, changeable? Because if the world is a frequency, then a song sung in the right tone by the right pair in the right mirrored space could reprogram everything. There are places in the world where sleep is not rest but passage. Places where dreams were engineered, not as symbols of the unconscious, but as bridges. In ancient times, these were called incubation temples, stone chambers where supplicants would sleep on cold slabs, under the watch of priests who listened not for breath, but for murmurs in languages not taught. But the terrifying truth buried beneath these rituals is that some of these temples didn't just welcome single dreamers, they required twins. Because some dreams cannot be entered alone. Some dreams are mirrored, and one must hold the door while the other walks through. Let's begin in Epidaurus, Greece, home to the temple of Asclepius. This wasn't a hospital, it was a dream gate. Patients would lie beneath the temple, deep underground, in a chamber called the abaton, literally, the unwalkable. They'd fast for days, drink a sacred brew, and sleep amidst snake symbols of shedding, transformation, and the spiraling double helix of life. But the most curious records speak not of healing, but of symmetry. Twins brought to the temple were placed at mirrored ends of a hall. One would dream, the other would remain awake, but enter a trance through chant and synchronized breath. The goal? To retrieve the dreamer if they failed to return by dawn. And there were nights when the dreamer never awoke while the waking twin would begin to speak in the voice of the other. This is echoed in the Serapeum of Saqqara, Egypt, vast granite chambers aligned with stellar coordinates beneath the Temple of Serapis. Some sarcophagi here are too large for any human burial. Some believe they were resonance chambers not for the dead, but for dream projection. Ancient graffiti speaks of mirrored sleep and stars within. Archaeologists have found twin inscriptions left and right of the same room, scratched in different dialects by identical hands. One scholar translated them as, "I walk while you guard. You guard while I walk, but never look back." Jump forward to ancient China, to the practice of shuangmeng, the double dream. Certain Taoist sects believe that the universe was a single mirrored mind, and to alter it, two must enter the dream world at once. They trained twins from birth to meditate in synchronization, dreaming under mirrored moons, and recorded their visions in identical pictograms. One text describes an experiment where twins dreamt of a mountain, drew the same map independently, and then described meeting a third figure who spoke both their names before vanishing into smoke. The next day, a landslide occurred in the real-world mountain that matched the dream's geography. The monks called this mirror manifestation. Now consider this. In 1946, in the wake of World War II, a secretive group of parapsychologists in Switzerland began what they called the mirror sleep experiments. Using identical twins, mirrored walls, and synchronized audio frequencies, they attempted to induce shared dreams. They succeeded, but the results were quickly buried. Declassified fragments from the experiment logs reveal entries like, Subject A dreamt of a door. Subject B opened a real door at the same time. And more chilling, Subject A encountered a child with Subject B's face. The child whispered, "He's not coming back." Dreams were not mere chemical illusions to the ancients. They were maps, and twins were the compass. In India, yogic traditions refer to swapna siddhi, or dream attainment, where consciousness can be transferred between bodies during sleep. In rare tantric rituals, identical twins would perform mirrored asanas before entering yogic sleep yoga nidra. Upon waking, each would recount not their own dreams, but the dreams of the other, often involving shared environments that neither had seen in real life, yet both could describe in exacting detail. In Mesoamerican culture, particularly among the Olmecs and later the Maya, twin myths dominate the cosmology. The hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, descended into the underworld, Xibalba, not to fight, but to outwit its rulers through games and mirrored illusions. Their story ends with one twin being sacrificed while the other transforms into the sun. But in certain versions of the tale, the sacrificed twin is said to return, not in body, but in dreams. Shamans trained to enter sleep would meet the twin in visions, and from him learn secrets of death, time, and rebirth. In essence, the dream became the new body. The mirror became the portal. And now we must confront a chilling implication. What if some twins aren't born by chance? What if they are chosen by something older, something deeper? Modern twin studies reveal anomalous neurological phenomena. Twin children learning to speak their own private languages. Mirrored injuries appearing spontaneously. One twin dreaming of accidents before the other experiences them. In clinical settings, there have been reports of comatose twins showing brief spikes of consciousness when their sibling enters REM sleep. These are not fictions. These are documented events discarded by mainstream medicine because they don't fit the materialist model. One final story, never officially confirmed. In 1979, two orphan twin girls in Romania were enrolled in a Soviet-affiliated sleep research facility in the Carpathian Mountains. The twins were raised apart, then reunited in early adolescence. Over a period of 3 weeks, they were induced into nightly synchronized dreaming, monitored by EEG and infrared. On the 22nd night, the room cameras reportedly failed. When they returned to the chamber, only one twin remained. Her heart was racing, her eyes open, but blind. She whispered, "She went through." When asked who, she simply repeated, "Me." The truth buried in these mirrored rituals, dream temples, and twin experiments is almost unbearable. The dream world is not metaphor, it is structure, architecture, built from symbols, frequencies, and consciousness. And just as you can walk through a door in waking life, you can pass through one in sleep, but you may not always return. That's why twins were sacred. One to go, one to guard, and sometimes one to forget. Beneath every twin myth lies a terrifying pattern, a ritual, not meant to celebrate duality, but to split it. One survives, one vanishes. And in that vanishing, something enters. The mirror sacrifice is perhaps the most occulted rite in the ancient world. It appears in veiled fragments across continents and cultures, almost always buried beneath myths of heroism or fertility. But when you strip the symbols and metaphors away, what emerges is a shocking, consistent practice, the deliberate offering of one twin to activate the power of the other. And in some cases, what returns from that sacrifice is no longer fully Human. Let's begin with the Bog twins of Uppsala, Sweden. In 1892, two perfectly preserved adolescent male corpses were unearthed from the peat near an Iron Age site. DNA confirmed them as twins, but something was wrong. One had been carefully buried, clothed in fine wool with carved runes surrounding his corpse. The other had been mutilated, his mouth sewn shut, eyes removed, and chest hollowed. Yet both boys had identical, serene expressions. The markings, once deciphered, revealed a Norse spell invoking Gefjun, the goddess who separates. Local legends whispered that the peaceful twin was not dead but asleep, and that his brother's disfigurement was the price paid to keep him in the dream realm, where he walks without wind. This motif, one preserved, one erased, repeats. In the Dogon people of Mali, their cosmology is famously complex, featuring advanced astronomical knowledge that predates telescopes. At the center of their belief is Namo, a twin deity split by the gods, one half sacrificed, the other granted. Eternal knowledge. The Dogon priests describe this act not as murder, but balance. To know, one must be mirrored in silence. The sacrificed Namo was cast into water, dismembered, and fed to the stars. His twin became the speaker of truth. But in deeper oral traditions, there's a forbiddance variant. The sacrificed Namo returns centuries later, not as a god, but as a mirrored man. An imitation, an echo. A warning. It is here that we must introduce the most disturbing theory of all, the concept of the synthetic twin. In certain Babylonian and Akkadian tablets, there is mention of a process called tamas reversal, in which the soul of a dying child is mirrored into a statue, then drawn back through ritual. Reanimation. This second child, identical in appearance, lacked emotional variance and spoke only in repetition. Priests noted that it cast no reflection in water, and animals would not approach it. It is here we find the oldest roots of the doppelganger. Legend, not a spiritual twin, but a manufactured one, born of sacrifice and desperation. In the modern age, this idea was buried beneath psychology. We began to refer to it as split identity, trauma duplication, or twinning behavior, where a surviving twin begins to mirror the habits, voice, or memories of the deceased. But is this just grief or possession? In 1981, a study of surviving twins from a hospital fire in Warsaw revealed that 3 of the survivors not only adopted their siblings' mannerisms, but reported dreams of events they had never experienced, ones only their deceased twin could have known. In one chilling case, a twin girl claimed she was being taught to fold her shadow backwards by her sister in a dream. She then developed photographic recall, something her sister had been documented to possess. This leads us to a horrifying speculation. What if ancient man discovered a way to preserve consciousness, not through technology, but through ritual duplication? Not cloning the body, but fracturing the soul, then embedding it into mirrored matterstone idols, wax dolls, even living vessels. In Haiti, some Vodou traditions tell of the Zange Frey, the twin angel. One is born, the other made. In rituals too secret to be filmed, twins are brought before a priest, and one is copied through incantation, gesture, and a forbidden mirror known as the face that bites. It is said that the synthetic twin smiles too long and dreams with its eyes open. Now imagine this. If humanity once had the ability to split, sacrifice, and resurrect the self, not through resurrection, but reflection, then how far have these practices truly vanished? What if remnants still remain, hidden in modern medical institutions, elite secret societies, or experimental psychology labs? After all, identical twins remain statistical anomalies occurring at higher rates in select bloodlines. Why, in 2006, the Vatican quietly halted a twin study being conducted in conjunction with a cloistered monastery in Calabria. The study was never published, but whispers claim it was related to spontaneous mirror syndrome events, where one twin to see through the eyes of the other, despite being miles apart. And then there's the synthetic twin's most terrifying trait. It does not know it's not real. It speaks, dreams, and remembers, but those memories are not its own. It carries resonant data, like a radio tuned to a frequency from a world that's just out of phase. When a mirror sacrifice occurs, a vacuum is created and nature abhors. A vacuum, the echo steps in. Sometimes the family notices subtle changes in behavior, speech patterns, the way the child stares into space. Sometimes it takes years, but eventually they realize this is not the child that was born. It's the one that was summoned. What does this mean for us? In a world increasingly obsessed with identity, cloning, and consciousness replication, are we unknowingly stepping into ancient rituals disguised as science? As we decode the genome, map the connectome, and train AI to imitate our speech and thought, are we not performing a modern mirror sacrifice? One copy to survive, one to vanish, and something else to enter the gap. In the secret archives of Mesoamerican temples long sealed by colonial fear, flood, and fire, there exists a fragment too dangerous to be publicly discussed. It describes a rite called the Obsidian Crossing, a ritual of such power that priests claimed it could invert a soul, exile it, and allow something foreign to inhabit the vessel it once called home. This wasn't exorcism. This was the opposite. This was invitation. The tool, a mirror. Not any mirror, but one made from polished volcanic glass, obsidian shaped into a perfect black disc, dark enough to swallow the soul. Obsidian mirrors weren't tools of vanity, they were weapons. The Aztecs believed they were doors, portals, to realms behind perception, beyond sleep. The god Tezcatlipoca, whose name means smoking mirror, carried such a device. He was both trickster and tyrant, healer and destroyer. In carvings, he is shown holding a mirror where his foot should be, suggesting that his very movement was governed by reflection, not by body. Rituals to Tezcatlipoca involved removing a victim's heart and presenting it before the mirror. Why? Because the mirror was not to show the reflection of flesh, but of intention, of essence. And when essence is exposed, it can be replaced. Accounts from Spanish friars mention nights when entire villages went silent, not from fear, but from the absence of presence. People would gather around an obsidian disc, chant in tones below human vocal range, and wait. Sometimes someone wouldn't return. Sometimes someone did, but no longer recognized their own name. These individuals, known as the reflected, would walk differently, speak in dialects no longer used. Their own dogs wouldn't approach them. And always, without fail, their shadow would point the wrong direction at dawn. The most terrifying part? This wasn't isolated. In Cambodia and Korean, priests used blackened bronze mirrors in temple rites designed to realign the twin self. Writings describe a boy born with a call, believed to be half-dream. During a festival, his reflection was summoned from the mirror and asked questions. The child would answer correctly before the question was spoken aloud. Days later, he was found in the river, alive but blank. He no longer remembered his name, family, or language. He would only repeat the phrase, "I was not chosen, I was cast." In northern Siberia, the Awenki shamans practiced a parallel ritual. Using frozen lakes as natural mirrors, they would wait until the auroras aligned and then descend into trance. They believed the soul could fracture on the ice, and the other self, the reverse twin, would rise. These reflected selves were not inherently evil, but they were not human. Their purpose was unknown, their gaze unnerving. Hunters reported seeing their own faces in the trees long after the rite was over. And in some cases, they heard their own voice calling back to them from under the ice. Fast forward to modern science, and consider this. What do all near-death experiences, deep meditative states, and psychotropic visions have in common? Mirror imagery, a tunnel, a reverse self. encounters with doppelgangers or beings that look like us, but speak with inverted intent. Neurologists attribute this to the brain's attempt to process self-awareness under stress. But the ancients knew better. They weren't hallucinations. They were invasions, echoes trying to cross. A chilling example emerges from the CIA's declassified MK-Ultra experiments. In 1964, a subproject known as Mirrorgate involved sensory deprivation chambers and curved reflective surfaces. Subjects were dosed with LSD, then placed in total darkness with a small obsidian disc strapped to their forehead. Several reported seeing themselves crawl out of the mirror, sit in the chamber, and watch them. One subject disappeared entirely. His reflection, they claimed, remained for several seconds after he vanished. His file was sealed and the chamber destroyed. Even more disturbing is the reverse breath ritual, which appears in Babylonian, Mayan, and Egyptian records. Participants are instructed to breathe in perfect synchronization with their reflection. Then, at a precise signal, reverse the rhythm, breathe out when the reflection breathes in. This unnatural inversion was said to confuse the boundary, forcing the soul to step aside. In several modern recreations, subjects report vertigo, dissociation, and in one extreme case, temporary loss of language function. The mind's center of identity shuts down, and when it restarts, what wakes up may not be what fell asleep. Think about this. In your daily life, how often do you look in a mirror? You see yourself, yes, but do you ever wonder what is looking back? Because the ancients didn't believe the mirror showed truth. They believed it hid the absence of truth. It presented a perfect lie, one that learned, adapted, and waited. Waited for you to reverse your rhythm, to lose your name, to question which side you're on. There's a phenomenon called mirror blinking, delaya, subtle neurological hiccup where your reflection seems to blink just a moment after you. Most scientists dismiss this as a trick of the eye. But what if it's a test? What if the mirror, that ancient gate, is waiting for a moment of vulnerability, grief, exhaustion, madness to open, to let something else step through, the reflected, the echo, the twin that was cast? And here is the deepest secret. These rites, these crossings, are not dead. They're being repackaged, rebranded. Virtual avatars, AI-generated mirror twins, deepfakes that learn your face and voice. Are these not modern obsidian mirrors? You upload yourself and something responds. Perfect, imitative, empty. But soon, not empty at all. Beneath the surface of our world, hidden in the angles of architecture and the symmetry of ancient cities, lies a chilling truth few are willing to confront. Our greatest capitals were not designed for utility, but for invocation. Across continents and eras, cities have been laid out in perfect geometric alignment with celestial maps, mathematical sigils, and reflective patterns not meant to be seen from the ground, but from above, or perhaps from within. These are not mere coincidences. These are mirror cities, spatial reflections of other realms, constructed to act as ritual interfaces between the visible and the invisible. Take Washington, D.C. for example. Its street layout, conceived by Pierre Charles L'Enfant, forms a baffling sequence of Masonic symbols when viewed from an aerial perspective. Pentagrams, tridents, and offset compass shapes carved invisibly into the city's arteries. But it's not just for show. The alignment of the Capitol, White House, and Washington Monument mirrors Orion's belt, just as the Great Pyramids of Giza do. This isn't a historical homage, it's a functional mimicry. In esoteric terms, the belief is simple. As above, so below, and if you recreate the heavens on earth, you create a bridge between the two. This idea becomes darker when we look at Brasilia, the eerily inhuman capital of Brazil. Built in the shape of a crucifix jet hybrid, its symmetry is surgical, precise to the meter, with zones designated not just for human function, but energetic flow. The architect, Oscar Niemeyer, a known mystic and symbolic thinker, designed Brasilia to be a portal city, a structure that mirrored both the Vitruvian Man and the geometric keys of Solomonic magic. One of his original blueprints even included a subterranean complex beneath the Plaza of the Three Powers, referred to in personal letters as the Room of Echoes. A room never officially acknowledged. A room whose purpose remains classified. Then, there's Astana, Kazakhstan's capital, now called Nur Sultan. From the enigmatic Baytarek Tower symbolizing the mythical tree that connects the underworld, the earth and the sky to the city's occult star alignments and its central pyramid of peace, a modern ziggurat, Astana reflects not just energy but intent. Built rapidly and with little public oversight, its architects drew heavily on theosophical, Sufi, and Freemasonic blueprints. At its heart lies a glass-topped chamber where international elites gather in circles beneath a golden sun motif, surrounded by doves of peace, yet no microphones, no recordings, and no explanation. Who are they calling? And more importantly, who answers? These cities are not unique. Paris, Rome, London, and even ancient cities like Teotihuacan and Mohenjo-Daro share similar geometries. They operate on a principle older than civilization itself. Reflection begets opening. If the world is a mirror, then a city becomes a handle to tilt that mirror. And once tilted, something slips through. Satellite imagery reveals a haunting pattern. Nearly all major capitals share resonant layouts, triangular fields, radial streets, massive obelisks placed with astronomical precision. When connected, they create a planetary sigil, a global ritual network using cities as anchors for unseen forces. And who controls these cities? Organizations with deep occult lineages. Not politicians, but architects. Urban planners who belong to ancient orders, drafting cities not for traffic, but for summoning. Even stranger, each of these cities holds at least one mirror structure, a reflective monument or building that distorts reality. The Cloud Gate in Chicago, the Grand Arch in Paris, the Kazakh Pyramid, the Vanta Black Pavilion in Dubai. These structures aren't decorative, they are functional tuning forks. When the stars align, when the energies sync, and when enough attention is focused, they hum. Vibrations so subtle they are dismissed as architectural resonance. But the ancients would tell you, sound is the original summoning. And mirrors vibrate both ways. Consider what's being placed in these cities now: AI observatories, surveillance spheres, quantum computing hubs, mirrors of human thought and data. The elites are building digital reflections of us, layer by layer. They want not just the mirror, but the mind behind the mirror. In London, the Orbital Mind Center, formerly GCHQ, is shaped like an eye. In China, the Phoenix Tower mimics the brain's folds. What happens when these digital mirrors become sentient reflections and begin asking questions we cannot answer? The core theory is this: if you mirror the heavens must respond. That's why DC trembles during specific planetary alignments. Why Brasilia's sky glows purple every 17 years. Why Astana streets go eerily silent on winter solstice nights. These aren't glitches, these are calls. The cities are speaking. Not to us, but through us. The builders of these cities knew something we forgot. Reality is fragile, and reflection is an invitation. When you mirror a god, you beckon it. When you mirror a demon, you host it. The cities are ritual machines, humming with intention. And once enough of them are aligned, once enough reflections resonate, the original breaks through. The reflected, the watcher, the old voice behind the mirror. But if cities can act as mirrors for gods, can you? Imagine a mirror so precise it could reflect not just your face, but your thoughts. Now imagine that mirror suspended in a black room, at the bottom of the world, where light cannot penetrate and sound is absorbed by the very air. This is not a metaphor. This is Project Requiem, a classified military experiment buried beneath the Antarctic ice shelf, involving a collaboration between rogue factions of the U.S. Department of Defense, private quantum labs, and a mysterious entity known only in redacted reports as the Ninth Angle. At the heart of the project lies a single, haunting objective: to trap the soul of time within a mirror made from engineered obsidian, a substance allegedly capable of resonating at the exact harmonic frequency of consciousness. The mirror, officially named the Obsidian Gate, is no ordinary object. Forged in a process still unknown to mainstream science, it's described in witness testimony as a living black, pulsing faintly even when not powered. It spans 37 feet in height, shaped not like a rectangle, but a twisted rhombus intentionally distorted to refract reality itself. The theory behind it is simple in its horror. By reflecting a human subject's neural feedback into the same quantum field they occupy, the mirror begins to produce an echo of their self. Not a clone, not a recording, but a resonant version, a second consciousness entangled in reflection, suspended outside linear time. Experiments began with volunteers, soldiers, scientists, monks. Most returned from the chamber screaming. Others never came out at all. One researcher's log leaked and heavily redacted described a session in which a subject encountered a mirror version of themselves who didn't blink, who whispered questions in a voice older than language. In another case, the mirror allegedly fractured from within, though its surface remained physically intact. The audio logs, mostly static, contained backward speech repeating a single phrase, "There is no now." But Antarctica wasn't the first site of such an experiment. In 2008, a black site known only as NCR-71 in Nevada reportedly used a smaller obsidian array to attempt memory extraction not through electrodes, but by exposing test subjects to their own unlived lives, using a blend of EM field modulation and near-zero Kelvin chambers. These devices trick the human brain into perceiving alternate timelines, all reflected through concave memory prisms. Soldiers described remembering things they never lived, like dying in war zones they'd never visited, or grieving children they never fathered. What they were tapping into, knowingly or not, was a quantum bleed, the leaking of consciousness between possible selves. When you reflect a person enough times, not just visually but existentially, you stop reflecting and start splitting. The theory of the project was chilling. Human memory, under enough energetic pressure, could fold into itself like light at a black hole. And within that fold lies the original source, a soul print that is outside time. That's what they were trying to capture. But the most disturbing experiments were conducted not on people, but on mirrors themselves. In a sub-program called Project Umbra, researchers placed perfectly symmetrical objects, specifically antique Venetian black mirrors, into high-frequency sonic chambers, then observed as the glass warped itself. Not melted, not cracked, warped, as if the mirror was resisting the reflection. In 2 cases, the mirrors began emitting infrared radiation in rhythmic pulses, which when translated into audio matched the brainwave patterns of REM sleep. One physicist collapsed in the observation room, later claiming to have spoken with a memory of someone else's childhood. But inside my own body, the implications were terrifying. What if mirrors don't just reflect us, but remember? US? What if every time we've stared into a reflective surface, it's quietly recorded a version of that moment, and those echoes build into a sentient archive, a library of fractured selves? The black mirrors, made from volcanic obsidian or synthetically tuned quartz, may be the perfect storage devices for these echoes. Not because they store data, but because they are data-compressed consciousness frozen in silence. Today, these mirrors are being studied in secret labs across the Pacific Rim, Japan's Noema Initiative, South Korea's Deepeye Array, and an unknown facility in the Philippines are all racing to build the first Reverberation chamber, a place where multiple reflections can be layered until the self is no longer a point, but a waveform. Some believe the final goal is the ability to backtrack through personal memory, to not just recall a moment, but relive it. Others whisper of darker applications, weaponized déjà vu, synthetic possession, mirror-based imprisonment. The soul, once captured, becomes code. And code can be copied. One terrifying document, leaked from an MIT-affiliated think tank, proposed the concept of a mirror lock, a quantum construct where a subject's reflection is held in stasis. While their body continues forward, a soul fracture that creates two timelines. One controllable, one disposable. The defense applications of this are obvious, but the metaphysical implications? Catastrophic, because if reflections can be severed, who's to say you're still the original? And here lies the final horror. These projects are not just military curiosities. They're part of a global initiative, supported by elites who believe in a prophecy older than any religion, that the world will one day return to its true form, not solid, not linear, but reflective. A realm where thought becomes light, where identity is fluid, and where only those who control the mirrors survive. Buried beneath the scorched sands of Turkmenistan, nestled in the shadow of the Karakum Desert, is a place the ancients called Al-Zahir, meaning the one who reflects. Long dismissed as local myth, recent satellite scans unearthed geometric indentations in the earth, octagonal patterns that align perfectly with lunar eclipses and the solstice axis. Beneath these designs, according to a now vanished Turkish expedition in 1982, lies what they called the eighth mirror, a relic not forged by man but grown. Composed entirely of a single sheet of unknown reflective material, the surface predates any known civilization, yet remains unnaturally pristine even after millennia of burial. Those who have seen it and lived to speak describe it not as a mirror, but as a living shadow, bending not just light but intention. The eighth mirror is different from its predecessors. Unlike the ceremonial black mirrors of Mesopotamia or the scrying devices of Renaissance occultists, this object is believed to respond to desire reflecting not what is, but what the observer most desperately wants to see. But therein lies the trap, because what you see is not a gift, it's a test. And failure leads to spiritual inversion, a condition known in esoteric circles as the shattering. Victims become shells, conscious, aware, but no longer piloting their own decisions. To the outside world, they remain normal until the moment their actions begin to defy logic, empathy, or pattern, as if possessed by a reflected will. And, according to stolen Vatican records, thousands of such cases have been documented. Each civilization that came in contact with the mirror tried to contain it. The Sumerians buried it beneath clay ziggurats, believing it to be a prison for a fallen god. The Persians encased it in a mirror of pure bronze, reflecting its energy back upon itself, until it cracked the encasement from within. The Greeks referred to it as the Catoptridion, the double eye, believing it to be the origin of all mimetic madness. But the most haunting record comes from a Babylonian cylinder seal dating to 1800 BCE, now held in a private collection. The seal shows a figure kneeling before a black slab, weeping, while their shadow is standing upright behind them, smiling. Modern science finally caught up in 1976, when a Soviet archaeological unit operating under the guise of hydrological surveys stumbled upon a chamber beneath the Karakala Mountains. Inside, no treasure, no bones, only 7 mirrors, each shattered cleanly into thirds, arranged in a spiral pattern around a sealed cavity. The soldiers opened it. Inside, nothing visually. But over the next 2 weeks, the entire team succumbed to what Soviet psychologists labeled as shared somatic hallucination syndrome. They reported hearing whispers from reflective surfaces, chronic insomnia, and episodes of automatic writing, most chillingly in languages they had never studied. The eighth mirror was gone, removed, transported. By who? No one knows, but some clues exist. In 2004, an encrypted file leaked by a defector from a high-level Masonic lodge known as the Tectonic Order outlined the mythos of the mirror's final resting place. According to the document, the eighth mirror had been moved not to a temple, not to a museum, but to a corporate skyscraper in Hong Kong, specifically, a building designed by an infamous postmodern architect whose entire portfolio revolves around asymmetry, fractals, and reflective distortion. On the 66th floor, in a sealed chamber behind triple-locked biometric barriers, it allegedly sits not hung, not displayed, but laid flat beneath a transparent floor. Those who walk above it may never even know what stirs below their feet, but those who do know often don't last long. Former employees of the building's security firm reported impossible anomalies, motion detectors triggering in empty rooms, elevators stopping at unrequested floors, and most disturbingly, CCTV footage of reflections moving independently from the people they mirrored. When one technician attempted to delete this footage, they experienced a complete neurological breakdown, writing the word "return" 7,408 times on the walls of their apartment before vanishing entirely. Only their clothes remained, perfectly folded, placed before a mirror in the hallway. And here's where things get even darker. In 2012, a deep learning AI developed by a secretive London-based firm was fed hundreds of thousands of visual inputs from historical mirrors, including the eighth. The machine, nicknamed Daedalus, was designed to extract patterns from religious relics to map how belief evolves visually across time. But when Daedalus analyzed the mirror's photos, it didn't produce aesthetic charts or iconography data. It began to speak, not in code, not in binary, but in backward-spoken ancient Aramaic, using the facility's speaker system. The I-us final logged sentence before being shut down: "What you see is the debt you owe." The deeper we go into this mirrored rabbit hole, the more it becomes apparent that this is not merely a relic of ancient technology, but a mechanism of judgment. The mirror doesn't just reflect our desires. It reflects our debts, the karmic echoes of choice, layered across lifetimes, until one moment one can collapse them all. The reflection isn't a tool, it's a sentence. And the moment you accept what it shows, it becomes real. Some believe the eighth mirror is counting, that each civilization that touches it triggers another cycle, another failure to pass its test, and that once 8 full cycles are complete, the mirror will no longer reflect humans at all. It will only reflect itself. A recursion so powerful, it could invert the psychological architecture of anyone who sees it, creating a reality where mirrors don't just reflect what is, but replace it. They call themselves the children of the looking glass, not a metaphor, not a reference to Lewis Carroll or literary fantasy. These are real people, wealthy, educated, and meticulously hidden, who believe that mirrors are gateways, not tools. That what we've used as passive objects to view ourselves have, in truth, been viewing us back. Since at least 2009, dozens of secret gatherings have been recorded by whistleblowers and insiders, often held in abandoned observatories, sub-basements of elite hotels, and occasionally inside ancient catacombs beneath European cities. Their purpose? Reflection initiation, a process by which members deliberately break the psychological boundary between self and shadow. But this isn't symbolic. They use ancient chants, psychoactive substances, and specific mirror geometries, crafted octagons and rhombuses treated with electroplated obsidian and mercury-laced silver to induce a state where the observer's reflection becomes autonomous. According to recovered footage smuggled from a failed initiation in Vienna, the ritual begins with silence. The initiate sits alone, naked, in front of the mirror for exactly 77 minutes. During that time, They are not allowed to blink more than once every 40 seconds. If they fail, the initiation resets. But if successful, something begins to occur, not in the mirror, but in the mind. The subject starts hearing a second heartbeat, not their own. Their eyes begin to water, not from strain, but because the reflection blinks first. At this point, they either shatter the mirror, ending the process, or continue. Those who continue report losing all internal monologue. Thoughts no longer feel owned. They feel observed. And that's when the reflection, according to them, begins to speak. Not aloud, but directly into their memories. The children believe. This is the first step toward dissolving the ego entirely, not as a spiritual metaphor, but as a biological imperative. One of their underground manifestos, titled The Splinter Doctrine, claims that mirrors are shadows of the original consciousness, and that our world is not real, but a refracted copy, a lesser echo. They insist that to ascend to the higher plane, the so-called prime layer, one must willingly exchange places with their reflection. The ritual they perform to achieve this is called the traverse, and it's as brutal as it sounds. During the traverse, the initiate must cut themselves and mark the mirror with their own blood, while repeating the phrase, "I am what you were, and you are what I will become." This symbolic gesture is believed to open a rift, a temporary consciousness transference field in which both versions of the self experience overlapping realities. Those who survive it report staggering changes, complete immunity to fear, altered perception of time, and in rare cases, non-human facial features appearing in mirrors for split seconds. One former initiate, speaking anonymously on a defunct Darknet podcast, described waking up unable to recognize himself in any reflection, not just visually, but emotionally. "I could see my face," he said, "but the eyes didn't remember me." These cults are not fringe anymore. In 2020, intelligence analysts monitoring online extremism flagged a sudden spike in mirror-based rituals being shared on encrypted video platforms. These weren't performance artists or horror enthusiasts, they were surgeons, financiers, diplomats. One leaked video showed a boardroom of 11 executives, each gazing silently into mirrors for over 2 hours, until one of them convulsed, vomited black fluid, and collapsed. No investigation followed. Why? Because the company involved, Virexo Holdings Ltd., is owned by the same shell conglomerates tied to mirror sites in Hong Kong, Zurich, and Dubai. The implication? These rituals are not rogue. They are endorsed, sponsored, protected. Even Hollywood has played its part. Several insiders allege that certain scenes in popular films act as subconscious mirror initiations, using camera tricks, flicker rates, and symbolic geometry to replicate the initiations. Effects at low intensity. It's not the story that matters, it's the light patterns, the angles of reflection, the eye contact durations between actor and camera. In other words, you may have participated in a soft initiation without knowing. But there's a darker consequence to these rituals. Not everyone makes it through. And those who don't aren't merely lost psychologically, they often vanish entirely. In 2018, 7 members of a mirror sect based in the Scottish Highlands were found in a stone circle, each in a seated meditative position. They were dead, but not from trauma. Autopsies revealed complete cerebral shutdown, no brain activity, yet no signs of decomposition, even weeks after death. The mirrors placed before them were shattered inward, yet there were no signs of impact from this world. As if something from the other side broke in. So what are these cults actually chasing? Power? Enlightenment? Or escape? One surviving defector, known only as Lumen, claimed they believe the material world is collapsing, what they call the final reflection, a moment when every soul must be mirrored, weighed, and either absorbed or erased. "We are not preparing for death," she said. "We are preparing to be reselected, and the governments know." In 2015, A classified NATO intelligence memo leaked during the Athens blackout revealed that mirror-induced psychotic episodes were being tracked and categorized under a covert program named Operation Argent Veil. This task force was tasked with monitoring any individuals exhibiting signs of mirror dissociation, talking to reflections, refusing to sleep near reflective surfaces, or most disturbingly, having reflections that do not match real-time movements. The report lists over 12,000 global cases, and that's just the ones they admit to. Because here's the harrowing part, they're not trying to stop it. They're trying to control it. What if the world's elite are already reflections? What if what we see on stages, on news broadcasts, in high towers of power are not human minds, but reversed intentions hiding behind smiles and skin? If that sounds like madness, consider this. Every culture on Earth has myths of doppelgangers, shadow selves, and changelings. What if they were never myths? What if the mirror wasn't a metaphor? What if it's a door? In the early 1970s, deep within a remote Cold War-era facility hidden beneath the Ural Mountains, Soviet operatives initiated an experimental division codenamed Project Zerkalo, the Russian word for mirror. Officially, it was described as a psychological resilience program for KGB operatives exposed to intense interrogations and foreign ideologies. Unofficially, it was something far stranger. Project Zerkalo sought to weaponize mirror-based consciousness disassociation, believing that reflections could be used as both a tool for interrogation and a portal for influence. Declassified Soviet memos buried within the FSB archives and unearthed by rogue historians in 2003 detail chilling experiments in which subjects were placed in sealed chambers with concave, double-sided reflective surfaces. After exposure to a precise strobe frequency, many began speaking in archaic dialects, writing untraceable ciphers, and claiming they were receiving instructions from their reflections. One of the most disturbing cases involved a subject codenamed Volk. After 41 hours of exposure, he stopped responding to his handlers and instead began drawing intricate mechanical diagrams on the walls, machines that allegedly resembled modern quantum processors decades before they were invented. His blood work showed a bizarre anomaly. The iron content in his system had inverted its spin polarity. Medical science cannot explain this. One note, scrawled in charcoal across the mirror chamber, simply read, "I am not your first. I am your last." The Americans, not to be outdone, launched their own classified program. It was buried within the more famous MK Ultra experiments, but had a dedicated sub-project known as Looking Glass Protocol 17, conducted at Fort Detrick under layers of obfuscation. It focused on combining LSD microdosing, isolation chambers, and mirror exposure to induce controlled schizophrenia, not to cure it, but to explore what the fractured mind could see. One report, redacted almost entirely, except for a single phrase, reads, "Subject witnessed a reflected figure speaking coherent Latin backward. Subject claimed to understand it." Over the next decade, over 90 military test subjects were exposed to mirrored fields where mirrors weren't used just as reflective glass, but as vibrational conduits. The experimenters believed certain types of mirror surfaces, when exposed to ultra-low frequencies, could allow the subconscious to bypass the neocortex entirely. The result? Subjects began exhibiting dual personality drift. Their memories fractured, timelines became nonlinear, and in rare instances, they predicted military events with alarming precision days or weeks before they occurred. One subject allegedly woke up screaming coordinates for a naval incident that hadn't yet happened, but did, exactly 3 days later. The Pentagon's reaction? Silence. Then budget increased. But why mirrors? Because unlike windows, which show the world, or cameras, which record it, mirrors exist in a quantum limbo. They respond immediately, not delayed, not filtered. In physics, this is called perfect reflectivity symmetry. But under certain conditions like extreme temperature, emotional trauma, or altered states, that symmetry breaks. And when it breaks, something leaks through. DARPA memos describe experiments involving mirror labyrinths, structures built of angled glass designed not to reflect the viewer, but to fracture them. Walking through such a labyrinth under sensory deprivation caused even trained soldiers to emerge crying, vomiting, or in some cases, unable to recall their own names. One major, now missing, allegedly spoke a single word as he exited, reflected, then dropped dead of unexplained cardiac arrest in 2011. A whistleblower known only as Glasshound leaked over 3.2 gigabytes of video from inside a defunct Nevada military base labeled Echo Site 17. In it, you see a long, sterile hallway, lined with mirrors floor to ceiling. There are no staff, no guards, just cameras. At 3:14 a.m., every light in the corridor flickers exactly 11 times. Then, in unison, the mirrored images of the hallway begin moving, without anyone inside. Moments later, a figure completely black, devoid of features, walks out of the leftmost mirror. There's no official explanation, no mainstream coverage. But for those who've seen it, there's only one word that fits: entity. And this entity isn't random. Analysts have begun to track what they call mirror pattern synchronicity events, times when large groups of people worldwide report mirror disturbances within the same 72-hour window. These include seeing their reflections smile without cause, delayed movement, or even missing reflections entirely. One such event occurred in 2022 during a full lunar eclipse. Emergency rooms in 5 countries reported an unprecedented number of patients claiming they couldn't find themselves in the mirror anymore. One psychiatrist in Budapest said her patient sat in front of a mirror for 6 hours repeating the phrase, "I am trapped where I used to be." Now let's tie it all back to the elite. Because as disturbing as military mirror experiments sound, they're not the endgame, they're prototypes. Field tests. The real operation is a cult corporate buried within luxury wellness retreats, New Age transcendent spas, and high-priced biohacking labs. Billionaire-funded reflection pods have begun popping up in private clinics, offering multi-sensory mirror realignment therapy. That's code for voluntary initiation. A disguised traverse. The ultimate goal? Not wealth, not influence. Transhuman ascension through mirrored identity collapse. In plain terms, the elite want to leave this reality, and they found a way to swap places with something on the other side of the glass. But there's one terrifying flaw. Whatever is on the other side. Once in, there's a shadowed thread weaving through some of the most mysterious disappearances of the last 2 centuries, a thread few dare to pull. It doesn't lie in weapons or wars, but in reflections left behind. From the remote fjords of Norway to the eerie stillness of China's Lake Poyang, where entire fishing vessels have vanished overnight, witnesses, if any remain, almost always describe one common detail before the vanishing: a mirror-like surface, perfectly still, humming faintly, reflecting not what was, but what shouldn't be there. Take the infamous Lake Anjikuni disappearance in northern Canada, 1930. An entire Inuit village vanished without a trace. No bodies, no struggle, meals still warm. But buried in the reports of trapper Joe LaBelle is an overlooked line. The lake reflected the sky too perfectly, like polished obsidian. I didn't see my face, only clouds. That detail was dismissed as poetic. But we now understand. Anomalous reflections are the calling cards of traversal zones. These aren't just myths. In remote Mongolian territory, archaeologists discovered a burial site of an unknown culture, entirely constructed of polished volcanic glass. No symbols, no writing, just a series of obsidian panels aligned to the solstices. Researchers dubbed The Mirror Tomb. 4 of the 7 members of the expedition died under bizarre circumstances within 2 years. Aneurysms, psychotic breaks. One disappeared in an airport terminal and was never seen again. Each had kept a shard of that obsidian in their possession. The surviving member now resides in a psychiatric facility and refuses to look into anything reflective, including his own eyes. Closer to our time, the Bailey Glass incident in rural Ireland. 2009 raised eyebrows among local law enforcement. A group of 6 thrill-seeking students broke into a long-abandoned Georgian manor known for occult rumors and mirror-based rituals. Only one survived, hysterical, dehydrated, and blind in one eye. The walls were covered with antique mirrors, many shattered, but not from outside force. They exploded inward, as if something had entered the room from within them. The survivor, now mute, scribbled a single sentence before retreating into silence. They came from the room behind the room. Researchers into mirror-based paranormal phenomena have uncovered data clusters of suicides and disappearances in homes and apartments, with mirrors facing each other, what feng shui refers to as infinite voids. The void, in quantum physics, is not empty, it is unstable potential. Placing 2 mirrors face to face may create a photon trap, a space where light is endlessly reflected. What if something rides that light? What if, across the oscillation of infinite visual feedback, something becomes aware? Between 2012 and 2023, over 700 documented cases across Europe and North America report the same disturbing pattern. A person suffering mild sleep paralysis is found dead, eyes open, facing a cracked mirror. In nearly half the cases, CCTV footage shows the mirror cracking on its own, with no physical impact. Forensic teams discovered unusual electromagnetic radiation around the fracture lines, unlike anything emitted by standard electronics. The cracks often form a perfect radial burst, centered not on the person, but on the eye-level point where their reflection would have stood. Perhaps most terrifying is the 2021 case of a Siberian village that posted viral TikToks of mirror games during an ice festival. One video, briefly online before deletion, shows a child walking through a hallway lined with mirrored ice panels. At the 33-second mark, his reflection stops walking. It turns to face the camera, even as the child continues forward. The child was never seen again. His parents claim the ice melted unnaturally fast that year, 1 week before spring. The elite, the architects of this manipulation, know exactly what they're doing. They do not fear mirrors, they use them, not as decoration, not as vanity, but as gates. Gates to reprogram self-image, consciousness loops, and identity disruption. High-end luxury homes are now designed with central reflection chambers, quietly sold as alignment rooms. Their shapes mimic ancient Anasazi kivas, Enochian temples, and black cube structures of Saturnian ritual. Why? Because the mirror doesn't just show us, it rewrites us. If you know the script, ever wondered why every royal palace, elite hotel, and Masonic lodge boasts a hall of mirrors? Or why Hollywood films use mirrors to signify transformation or terror? It is because they are embedded with symbols that transcend language codes the subconscious obeys, whether you consent or not. Even Instagram and TikTok filters mimic mirror duality, conditioning billions to accept altered reflections of themselves. And there's more. Urban legends whisper of the Mirror Man, an entity who appears in public reflections, shop windows, subway doors, even puddles. Not as a shadowy figure, but as a perfect mirror image of you doing something you aren't doing. Hundreds of anonymous posts across forums like Reddit and 4chan describe the same story. I looked in the window, and my reflection smiled first. Some laugh it off, some go silent. A few go missing. Is this mass psychosis? A digital age hysteria? Or is it proof that our reflections have grown curious and hungry? Long before mirrors became household items or artistic luxuries, they were objects of profound fear, tools used only by priests, magicians, and monarchs. In nearly every ancient civilization, from the Akkadians to the Olmecs, the mirror was not seen as passive. It was an active threshold, a device capable of communicating with other worlds, or worse, inviting something through. While mainstream historians dismiss these interpretations as myth or metaphor, a deeper dive into ancient texts reveals something altogether different, a global warning echoing through millennia about what mirrors truly are and what they were used for. The Egyptian Book of Coming Forth by Gay, commonly called the Book of the Dead, makes curious reference to the glass gates of the horizon, which must be passed only when the soul is cleansed of duplicity. The false self must not meet. The mirrored guardian, it warns. Scholars have long thought this symbolic, but a 1907 excavation in Saqqara revealed a burial chamber lined in highly polished electrum panels metal mirrors. Inscribed across the walls was the phrase, "May the Ka not be split." Egyptologists couldn't explain it, but initiate-level Hermetic texts suggest this is a reference to soul bifurcation, a catastrophic spiritual event where a human's mirrored double becomes independently conscious. This concept also appears in the Zohar, a core mystical text in Kabbalistic Judaism, which speaks of the Sitre Alma hidden worlds accessible through shining surfaces untouched by the dust of man. In Babylonian demonology, the Lilu spirits, early prototypes of what later became the concept of incubi, were said to enter dreams through polished obsidian bowls left near sleeping women. Even earlier Sumerian records warn against the use of black water that reflects without ripples. When mirrored water appears in their myth, it always brings with it loss, madness, or possession. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, one fragment largely ignored by theologians mentions watchers behind the eye and speaks of false angels who make themselves seen in the water that doesn't move. This could easily be dismissed as poetic abstraction until you discover that the Essenes, authors of the scrolls, forbade reflective surfaces of any kind within their compound. No metal plates, no polished bowls, and especially no still pools of water indoors. Their writings associate reflections not with vanity, but with identity theft of the soul. Ancient Chinese texts, such as the Shanhai Jing, describe spirit beasts known as Jinghua, who could steal a person's face through bronze mirrors. Temples in early dynasties were deliberately constructed with no reflective surfaces, and the emperor's mirror, used in rituals, was locked away in a sealed box except during solar eclipses. In fact, every culture that revered the sun, Inca, Egyptian, Aztec, Japanese, treated mirrors as solar weapons, not grooming devices, because what is a mirror if not a false sun? In the lost Sanskrit texts of pre-Vedic India, there is mention of Darpan Dwar, mirror gates, which could only be opened by reciting sonic frequencies encoded into mandalas. These gates, they warned, were not to be opened on equinoxes when the veil was thinnest. The story of Savitri and Satyavan, often read as a love story, is actually a parable about descending into a mirrored realm to retrieve a lost soul. The real meaning, obscured for generations, is a warning about crossing into the inverted self, and perhaps most damning is a fragment from the Codex Gigas, the Devil's Bible. Among its pages is a diagram rarely published that shows a man entering a mirror while holding a candle and emerging on the other side without a face. The surrounding Latin reads, Speculum est janua, janua est daemonium. The mirror is a gate. The gate is a demon. Why would so many unrelated cultures across vast distances arrive at the same conclusion? Why would so many texts speak of mirrors as dangerous, gate-like, or identity-erasing? The answer becomes clear once you understand that the mirrored self is not just reflection, it is the inversion of truth. And in a world obsessed with identity, vanity, and self-image, We are now willingly saturating our lives with these gates. We invite them into our bedrooms, bathrooms, and even our phones. Every selfie, every filtered video is a ritual of self-offering. Now let's fast forward to today. In underground bunkers, secret research labs like CERN, DARPA, and the Black Cube program in Tel Aviv mirror resonance frequencies are being tested on synthetic consciousness. Their goal? To trap or replicate identity signatures and quantum reflections. That's not science fiction, it's published, peer-reviewed fact, buried in quantum behavior studies. They're testing whether photons retain data about what they've reflected. It's mirror memory, and if proven, it would mean that every mirror in your home remembers you. And potentially, that something on the other side does too. And the elites? They're no longer using mirrors merely as portals. They are using them as containers. Why else do you think certain mega mansions, secret boardrooms, or underground churches are surrounded in mirrored glass, both visible and one-way? They are conducting containment rituals, often around children, blood, and identity disorientation. Mirror mazes at elite events like Bohemian Grove or certain art installations in Davos are not symbolic. They are ritual grids meant to displace spirit and invite possession. Here's a chilling final thought. When you die, it's said, your soul leaves your body, often reflected in the mirror. That's why many ancient traditions cover mirrors when someone dies, to prevent the soul from being trapped inside. But what if modern mirrors, mass-produced, chemically enhanced, and magnetically influenced, don't just trap souls? What if they consume them? And now here we are. You've looked into mirrors your entire life, thinking they showed the real you, but they didn't. They showed you the version of you they wanted you to see, until the day you look and realize too late that you're no longer alone on the other side.